Hello, Jolly Franchers. Jolly here. I have a confession to make. I had a bad time in school, and I had a good time playing video games. This may seem obvious to you, but it haunts me. My memories of video games I've played stand out more than any memory I experienced in the classroom, where I spent most of the first 22 years of my life. More than any memory I have of what I was supposed to be learning that whole time. I think that's a problem. It might just be my problem, of course, but I think there's a lot we all can learn from video games. In fact, I think video games might be the solution to this problem. And here's why. The best memories I have are video games I played and who I played them with. I'll never forget watching my brother play Tales of Symphonia all summer long, while my sister and I baked a cake so poorly that we ended up frying it in butter. I'll never forget playing Far Cry 2 with my brother and eating 3 King of Pops popsicles a day and listening to Budo's Band for some reason. I'll never forget playing the original Pokemon Blue mashed between my brother and sister on a road trip, yelling at my dad to stop pressing the sneak button in Skyrim whenever he got nervous, or saving and quitting when I reached the Lost Woods in Breath of the Wild, so that when Emily was done performing in her show, we could play it together in her tiny cruise ship cabin. I didn't want to play it alone. For me, video games are inherently social. If I'm not playing with someone, well then the author is talking to me, the characters, the story. It's a form of communication, the same as a teacher in a classroom. So why don't I remember my time in the classroom? I certainly remember my time around campus with my friends, but in the classroom? Unfortunately, even though I was privileged to attend private school, my teachers just didn't have the same set pieces that video games have to capture attention. Teachers don't have access to entire theatrical troupes, let alone 3D modeling software, voice actors, open worlds to explore, and combat systems. The average teacher has their voice, a textbook, and a whiteboard to work with. The most interesting one of those is their voice, and even I have to cut to clips of video games to have a chance of keeping you engaged by mine. This was my biggest issue in school, staying engaged. The things I remember best from class were trying to stay awake in pre-calc, or that time I got to sit on the floor in Spanish, or when my history teacher would suddenly yell, "Little Debbie snack cakes!" Those small changes in what were otherwise a very one-sided attempt at communication are all I remember. The average upbringing, at least where I'm from, mostly consists of sitting in a classroom and listening. No getting up and moving around, and certainly no talking. It's understandable, of course. Distractions make it difficult for the teacher or your fellow students to focus on the lesson. But for someone who craves interaction, motionlessness in a classroom rarely led to learning. And so I craved interactivity. I craved video games. In a world where the thing I most consistently interacted with was food, suddenly in video games there was infinite interactability. Fighting, driving, flying, shooting, stealing, tricking, sneaking, exploding. And obviously, there was still eating. And this is why immersing someone in a story, in an experience, like a TV show, movie, or role-playing game, or, yes, a video game, might be the greatest tool we have for communicating with one another, for sharing our experiences, for teaching. There are a whole host of ways that video games make themselves more accessible, more engaging than a classroom. The things the two have in common are plentiful, but we can draw the clearest connection between school and tutorials. It's immediately evident that a classroom has less ability to be engaging than a video game tutorial. If we think about a game like The Witness by game designer Jonathan Blow, the first thing that stands out is how beautiful it is. It's much, much easier and cheaper to build an entire paradisical island than a school building of similar aesthetic beauty. And in extreme cases, like The Witness, it took them 7 years to build that island. What some teachers have to do in a month over the summer, the team behind The Witness built their lesson plan over 7 years. There's no wonder why video games stand out to me over the countless hours I spent in a classroom. It takes immense time, money, effort, and playtesting to bring a game to audiences. And a game doesn't have to be aesthetically beautiful to be engaging, because in a game like The Witness, the comparison between tutorial and classroom goes much further. Over the course of your time in The Witness, you learn a language. Not a real language that you can speak or something like arithmetic. That would be great. But the same principles could apply to teaching language or math. The Witness sets you free in an open world with many mysterious puzzles scattered around the island. You'll come to some symbols you don't understand, piquing your curiosity. You'll remember that darn symbol, and you might even form a grudge against it. And eventually, you'll come across that symbol again. And this time, the unknown symbol will be featured in a much simpler puzzle. Now, through a tiny bit of trial and error, you solve the puzzle and are led through puzzles of increasing complexity with the new symbol, until your knowledge of the symbol's meaning is sufficient to carry on with the game. This process of self-driven discovery is what led me to teaching myself the various aspects of game development, reveling in the small victories. When I made my character's mouth stop moving when they were done speaking, when I implemented adaptive music, passing from one side of a barrier to the other. When I figured out how to change sorting layers for my top-down isometric city, or when I figured out how the kid detective could take photos in-game as evidence and then present them in trial. This type of self-discovery tutorial is featured in the most praised and critically acclaimed games of all time, whether it's figuring out what the jump button is in Mario, and then that your jump can crush your enemies, or whether it's learning that you can slice zombies in half with your gravity gun and a giant saw blade in Half-Life 2. Learning is done correctly in video games. It engages your curiosity. What else is possible? It's engaging, it's interactive, it makes learning fun. But where it's best for me is when the discovery isn't about the usual video game combat tricks, but you discover something about the narrative. Narrative as a tool to engage students. No one will ever forget finding the cake is a lie inside of a broken panel of wall in Portal. I'll never forget when the angels were actually the demons in Tales of Symphonia, a twist that had certainly not been overdone by countless JRPGs and animes, but this was the first time it had been done to me. Even better are the discoveries in video games that mesh with both the story and the gameplay. In Outer Wilds, a game wrestling with the theme of mystery, discovery, and uncertainty, and one of my favorite games of all time, when I finally I will never forget it. My mind was destroyed, and I won't spoil it here or anywhere because it's absolutely genius, and I want you to be able to experience what I did. And that's my whole point, really. I want you to be able to experience the same moments, the same incredible memories I have. That's why I'm telling stories on a podcast. That's why I'm making a video game about being a kid detective, because I've realized a lot later than most people that learning can be really fun. When I was a kid, I thought that learning meant I was trapped and bored. But really, it can be exciting, mind-blowing, rewarding, and life-changing. I want anyone to be able to learn how they learn best, which is why I think putting out free YouTube tutorials is really cool. They've helped me a lot, and I hope mine can help you in the same way. I want you to experience the things I have. And I know video games rarely teach any marketable life skills or things you might learn in school, but they certainly could. Let's take European history class, for example. My teacher can't literally transport me to Prussia where I could meet Otto von Bismarck. A video game could get a lot closer to that. I can't literally witness or perhaps be a part of the defenestration of Prague, but I would understand it so much better if I could. Why did the Renaissance start in Italy? Sounds like a detective game with stunning visuals, merging art history and a study of the socio-political climate at the time. How much easier would it be for a person to write an essay about why the Renaissance started in Italy if your class period was spent playing a gorgeous video game about it? Instead, teachers just don't have the budget for that. It's not their fault. Education is underfunded, and video games are really hard to make. Especially that video game where you learn calculus by exploring infinite fractal dungeons, or figure out how to check in an infinite amount of guests to your infinite hotel. Doesn't that sound really cool? Instead, calculus is not cool, but it could be. By immersing players in a narrative with rewards for persisting, cliffhangers to keep them hungry to learn more, and structuring tutorials to be as fun and engaging as possible, video games have all the tools to beat school to a pulp. So please, if you take anything away from this video, it is that teaching should be fun. If you want to teach, or you have an important story to tell, use the ultimate form of communication that is the video game. You can do it. It's possible. Video games do not have to be complicated technical achievements. A game like Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney, Undertale, or Night in the Woods can literally change people's lives, and you could make any one of those games using my tutorials or countless other free tutorials on YouTube. I have 15 tutorials currently on YouTube. In the time it takes to watch, synthesize, and put into place the knowledge accumulated therein, you could make your own story. And I really hope you do. I want you to make that fun, mind-blowing game that teaches me calculus, because I want to play it. It might replace textbooks one day. And until it does, stay jolly.